Okay, it is time for apparently the only regular content ranking of the books that I've read in the last 6 months. So let's just get into it. So, same tiers as last time, except for one additional one. Oh shit, it's got the weird, stupid. Hold on. Alright, now that we have the colors all set appropriately, these are the same categories except for one. We have mind blowing. Pretty sure that's self-explanatory. The book blew my mind. The next one is that it's a new favorite. Not quite mind blowing, but definitely a new favorite read. Glad I read it is something that I'm glad I read, but it's not quite a new favorite. Ambivalent or indifferent is I was conflicted on. Didn't work for me. The book didn't work for me, but I can see its appeal to others. An abomination is an abomination to society. And then we also have here rereads. And because I've been doing a lot of rereading, I figured I would just have my own little reread section here because 9.9 times out of 10, if I reread something, I already love it. Yeah, so let's go. So the first book that I read is City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this was not technically my first work that I read by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I read Made Things a few years ago, and it was fine. But Alan from the Library of Alexandria, his review of City of Last Chances, literally sold me the book. Like 2 minutes into the review, I was like, well, I can't watch the rest of this, and I pre-ordered the book. With that said, City of Last Chances is one of the most unusual, spectacular fantasy books I've ever read. It's simultaneously so narrow in scope, but you have this grand vision of where we want to get to, and it takes place in the city of Ilmar, and it follows a wide cast of characters as they are maneuvering through this city and trying to find a means to revolutionize. And each chapter is basically its own story. You are following a different character and their perspective. It is so spectacular. I just didn't expect it. It was everything that Alan said it was, but so much more. And I absolutely adored it. So it definitely blew my mind. I absolutely adored it. The next one that I read was a novella from KJ Parker, Mightier Than the Sword, and it takes a play off of the term "the pen is mightier than the sword." And this one follows if I recall correctly, a man who is leading this society where there is a importance and a priority on libraries and books. There's an attempt at control of this society through the control of these buildings that house books. Unfortunately, much like a lot of KJ Parker's novellas, they kind of run together a little bit. I really enjoy reading them, but I don't recall particular aspects of it, like of characters or anything. But I really enjoyed it. So I would say I am glad that I read it. The next book that I read was the penultimate book in not only the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, but the Realm of the Elderlanes as a whole, and that is Fool's Quest. And I feel like I really can't say anything about Fool's Quest without spoiling anything and everything about the Realm of the Elderlanes. So I will just say that it is, for me, definitely a middle book. However, there are a lot of incredible things that happen in this middle book, and I can't wait to reread it. So, I would say it is. I would say I would put it at the top of Glad I Read It. If I can get it above, there you go. All right. And then the next one that I read is a short story by Stephen Graham Jones called Attack of the 50-Foot Indian. And this is a play on, well, the kind of the like 40s and 50s like monster movies of like Attack of the 50-foot alien or 50-foot woman or whatever, and he plays it, he uses the Attack of the 50-Foot Indian, and rather than the Indian being the one that's doing the attacking, the story is this exploration of the attack on the 50-foot Indian. And I love the way Stephen Graham Jones, his storytelling and his just mind works, and it's just so interesting. So I basically gave away the entire story, but it's definitely worth the read. So I would put it up. I'd actually put it above Fool's Quest if I can get it over there. Come on, get up there. There we go. Then the next one I read was Prosper's Demon by K.J. Parker. This is another novella, and unlike Mightier Than the Sword, I still remember so much of this, and this I think was the first K.J. Parker work I gave a legit full 5 stars, which I was very excited about. I've always liked K.J. Parker's stories up to this point, but this one was the one that's like, yes, finally a 5 star for me. Prosper's Demon is one of K.J. Parker's more metaphysical stories. He tends to tell stories that are political or militaristic or metaphysical, and I really like the metaphysical stories that he tells. And this one is just, it tells about this man who is named Prosper and his demon, and that's all I'll say. So like I said, I really, really liked it. It was a full 5 stars. I would say, yeah, it blew my mind. Next one I read was Dreamer's Pool, and this was by Juliet Marillier. This is the first book in the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, and I don't know why I decided to try and read this. Actually, I do know why I tried to read this. I attempted to do a buddy read with Yolene of this trilogy in hopes that this would be better than the last 2 books of the Seven Waters trilogy, and I absolutely hated this book with every fiber of my being, and it just solidified the fact that Daughter of the Forest is the only book that I will ever like by Juliet Marillier. With that said, I think it's an abomination. It is awful. The writing is not terrible, it makes sense, but it's not compelling. The characters suck. The plot is so generic. There are so many depictions and descriptions that are awful. Just totally awful. The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni. I buddy read this with Anitha and Charia, and I absolutely adored it. The Palace of Illusions is a retelling of the Mahabharata, and I did not anticipate or expect to love not only the story as much as I do, but more particularly Divakaruni's writing style. Her writing is gorgeous, beautiful to read, and I can't wait to read more of her works. So it's definitely a mind-blowing. I would put it right there. And then I read Nothing But the Night by John Williams. This was the last John Williams book that I needed to read. The same John Williams who wrote Stoner, Augustus, and Butcher's Crossing. And Nothing But the Night is the first book that he ever wrote and published. He wrote it when he was in his early to mid 20s, and it definitely feels like a first book and a book that was written in your just as you're starting off, I guess. It's definitely not a book that you can see everything that Butcher's Crossing and Stoner and Augustus came to be. Like even the writing style is quite a bit different and from what you expect. But nonetheless, I really, really enjoyed it. It's kind of a mystery, kind of not really a thriller, but it's about a young man who has a tense relationship with his father, and you don't know why he has this tense relationship with his father, but you find out about why he has that relationship with his father, and it's really interesting. So I would say that I am very glad I read it, because now that I've read all of John Williams' works, published works, at least novels, I can say that he is a favorite author. So woohoo! All right, and then I read the final book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, the final book in the Realm of the Elderlanes, Assassin's Fate. Oh my god, it is the perfect ending to not only the trilogy, but the entire series as a whole. It was, I couldn't have asked for a better ending. And it was just so cathartic and beautiful and heartbreaking and beautiful and cathartic, and just all of this, just experiencing Fitz's life through, well, the 9 books, but over the course of the 16-book series, and seeing this entire world come to life. It feels so real. The characters feel so real, and I am just so happy, but also sad that I was able to read this entire series. And then I was just so sad that it was over. Definitely a mind-blowing book for me. At this point, it's my favorite book of the year, as of today's date. So, yeah. Next book that I read was a novella by K.J. Parker called The Big Score. Similar, this one, The Big Score is more along the lines of Mightier Than the Sword than Prosper's Demon. I get it, but I also don't really remember much of it, so I would say, like, I really appreciate K.J. Parker's writing style. I'm gonna put it as ambivalent and different, only because I don't really remember much about it, whereas I actually remember the premise about Mightier Than the Sword. That's not to say that The Big Score you shouldn't read The Big Score. The Big Score is good. I feel like you should read it. But yeah, plus it's KJ Parker, so read KJ Parker, please. So I reread The Bear and the Nightingale as my yearly reread, and surprise, surprise, I loved it. So yeah, not a surprise. To stave the open wound and grieving process that I had of finishing the entire Realm of the Elderlanes, I decided to read The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, which is a novella set in the same world, but it was great. I absolutely adored it. It takes place in the same world, obviously, as the Realm of the Elderlanes, but it has no relation to anything that happened in the main 16 books, and it just provides like context for the world itself and like the magic system. It's really, really, really good, which is not surprising considering it's Robin Hobb. So I would put it as new favorite. Yeah. Then I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I should say. I mean, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is in the zeitgeist at this point, and I finally read it, and I just didn't. I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. So, like, like, do I put it as a bomb? No, I don't think it's because there's I can't justifiably put it as an abomination because it's obviously a classic. It's withstood the test of time and all that jazz. But I'll just say, in my heart, it is an abomination. But I'll just put it that it didn't work for me. There you go. That's my compromise. All right. And then the next thing that I read was Zora Neale Hurston's Tell My Horse, which is a nonfiction essay collection of her travels in Jamaica and Haiti. No, Jamaica. Yeah, Jamaica and Haiti. That's right. And it follows her anthropological research about voodoo in both of those places, more particularly in Haiti. And I love Zora Neale Hurston, so she's amazing. Of course, I'm going to love it. As a nonfiction, I don't think it would be a new favorite. Actually, would it? Yeah, I would say it's a new favorite. At the tail end of a new favorite, and the kind of in between here, because it's for a nonfiction. I still think about it. And then after that, I read Deathless by Catherine M. Valenti. If you like this book, if you like Deathless by Catherine M. Valenti, please tell me why you like it and what the appeal is, because I genuinely do not understand. It's the most unreadable book I've ever read. I hated every moment of it. It was so frustratingly bad. It's worse than Dreamer's Pool, because at least Dreamer's Pool I could actually read. Deathless, I just... Ugh. Anyways, Abomination. There we go. Grace of Kings. I finally read Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, and I loved it. It was great. I love Ken Liu's short story collections, The Paper Menagerie and The Hidden Girl. So I was very excited to read, and also nervous to read The Dandelion Dynasty, because it's takes a different skill set to write short stories than it is to write novels, at least from my very limited experience as a reader of both of those types of fiction. And I was so pleased with The Grace of Kings. It is what Ken Liu set out to do. He did perfectly. He executed it perfectly. I will say that with it being perfection in my eyes, I would say that it is a new favorite, but at the very, very tippy top, like just a little bit over into mind blowing. Oh, hey Max. Hi, buddy. What's up? Hi, Boogie. What's a good boy? I know. All right, and then I read Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher, and I understood what she was going for. It's Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's not that hard to get what she was going for. But I just didn't like it. Yeah, I just didn't like it. It was too quirky for me, too bantery. Like, yeah, it was fine. But it didn't work for me. And then I read Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the second book in the Indian Lake trilogy, the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, and I loved it. I probably should have reread My Heart is a Chainsaw before I read this, because it took me a hot minute to kind of readjust myself to who all the characters were, other than Jade Daniels as the main character. But I loved it. It was great. I would say, where do I want to put this? Yeah, I'd say put it right there. And then I read Under My Skin by KJ Parker. Under My Skin, I really, really, really liked. Academic Exercises is still probably my favorite collection by KJ Parker, but I really, really enjoyed Under My Skin. There was just a lot there that I really enjoyed. And Prosper's Demon actually was one of the novellas that's technically in Under My Skin. But I decided to read Prosper's Demons separately since I have a physical copy of the novella outside of Under My Skin. So, anyways, Under My Skin, I would say it's a new. Yeah, I'd say new. Yeah, that's right. New favorite. There you go. And then I read Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. And this came out of frickin' nowhere. I did not expect to love this. I didn't expect to even like it, because gothic mysteries are really not my thing. But this came through out of left field and just slapped me across the face with how much I adore this book. It is so much more than a mystery and so much more than the gothic aspects of it. It is one that I'm actually really excited to reread, because it's just a really beautiful story about relationships and connection and identity and agency. But it's also creepy in a way, in a lot of ways. Not like super creepy, but creepy enough, unsettling. I would say. So I would definitely say it blew my mind. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I would put it right there. And then I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, because apparently I needed something in the complete opposite direction. And Half a Soul is the first book in the Regency Fairy Tales by Olivia Atwater, and it was exactly what I needed. It's very cute, and it is a fairy tale, a la a Regency Jane Austen-esque romance, and it was so good. It was exactly what I needed. I would say it's at the top of glad I read it. If the other Regency fairy tales are like this, like Half a Soul, then I'm very excited to read the rest of them. And then I reread The Girl in Tower, and surprise, surprise, I loved it. I love the Winternight trilogy. There we go. And then I finished up Father of Lies by KJ Parker. This is probably the weakest collection from him, but still, it's KJ Parker, so I can't complain. I would say it's here, yeah. And then I read Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Guns of the Dawn, if you have no idea what Guns of the Dawn is about, it's about guns at dawn. It's like if Jane Austen with their social commentary met like a military fantasy. I did not expect to love it nearly as much as I did. And I loved all aspects of it. It was fantastic, and it was so surprisingly deep, with its depictions and explorations of war and trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, the effects of war on every single person, individual, society, everyone. And it's actually a really great intertextual conversation going on between Guns of the Dawn and City of Last Chances. While City of Last Chances is going about looking at revolutions, Guns of the Dawn is looking at other people revolutionizing and what others will do to combat that revolution, if that makes sense. And I just think it's a really great, how Tchaikovsky is able to take similar themes and explore them in different ways, and from different angles is just I love Tchaikovsky. At this point, he is fantastic. Guns of the Dawn is definitely I would say it's up here. Yes, yeah, right there. And then I read The Little Animals by Sarah Tolmie. This is one of Sarah Tolmie's few novels, and it is a historical fantasy, more magical realism, fableism type novel, and it follows the historical figure of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the person, but the person who discovered bacteria. Yeah, so it follows him, his life essentially. But the kind of fantastical element to it is that there is this character called the Goose Girl who is able to hear hear the bacteria, and it's just really, it was really, really cool. I actually, the longer that I've spent away from it, the more that I've thought about it, and I just really, really like it. I mean, I love Sarah Tomy anyways, so no one should be surprised. How the Little Animals has grown on me since I read it is, I didn't expect it to grow on me as much as it has. So I would say it is a new favorite. Yeah, I put it right there. Finally, enough time had passed since I finished The Realm of the Elder Lanes that I could restart my journey with The Realm of the Elder Lanes, so I reread Assassin's Apprentice. I loved it just as much as the first time. It was just as emotional and compelling and beautiful and heartbreaking as the first time, and I adored it. So there you go. And then I read The Folding Knife by KJ Parker. I understand why Basso is such a, would you say, beloved character? I don't know. But the storytelling that KJ Parker displays in his stories is expanded upon, and just, he gives himself more room to breathe in the novels. And it's this really interesting kind of experience as a reader where you're getting the same exact experience in his stories as you do his novels, and vice versa, at least for me. But it's just either condensed or expanded upon in a really good way. Like, he is not drawing things out unnecessarily to make it a novel, and he's not condensing the stories down so much that you're missing crucial information. He's telling these stories in the length that is required to tell them. So The Folding Knife, though, I would say it didn't quite blow my mind. Yeah, I would say it's a new favorite. And then the next thing that I read was a reread of Senlin Ascends. We started a reread of the Books of Babel, myself, Tanner, and a bunch of other folks. And I was really nervous to read Senlin Ascends because after finishing the entire series, I was like, will it hold up? I don't know. So I was very happy to know that it does hold up on reread. And I really, really enjoyed kind of being back with Senlin, being back in the world of the tower, and it was great. And then after that, I read The Wall of Storms, the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty. This was Ken Liu. I don't know how he did it, but Ken Liu was able to take something as incredible as The Grace of Kings and write a sequel that is in equal parts on the same level while still being, like, still ramping it up. Like, they're two totally different things going on, where The Grace of Kings, you have this very broad, expansive scope that is kind of more high level, and The Wall of Storms has a lot more character depth to them. Not to say that Grace of Kings doesn't have character depth, but I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but they're both fantastic. I would say Wall of Storms is, I like it slightly more than Grace of Kings. Yeah, and I would move Prosperous Demon down. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, there we go. And then I read a short story collection called Universal Love by Alexander Weinstein. It's a science fiction collection. It's a solid collection. It's not mind-blowing. They're not like Ted Chiang thought experiment style stories. They're just, he has a very solid thematic through line through all his stories. I genuinely don't remember really any of the stories, but while reading them, I enjoyed my experience with them and my time with them. I do remember that much for sure. So I will say that I'd put at the end of glad I read it. And then I finished out my reread of the Winter Night trilogy by rereading The Winter of the Witch. Surprise, surprise, I loved it. And then I also reread what was and still is my favorite book of the Books of Babel, and that is Arm of the Sphinx, Mr. Winters. And then I read Lead in the Mist by Hope Mirrorless. This is often touted as a pre-Tolkien fantasy, and it is about a town called Blood in the Mist, where it's on the border of this fairy place where they sell fairy fruit, and there's an obvious metaphor for this fairy fruit to be something, whatever you want that to be. Reading Blood in the Mist after reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, I don't think I would have enjoyed A Blood in the Mist if I hadn't read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, at least nearly as much as I did. You can tell that Susanna Clarke was inspired by Blood in the Mist, and it just seems like something that wouldn't be out of place in the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell world, or vice versa. And I really appreciate it for its historical significance, for its impact, and it's just a really, really interesting short, like, quasi mystery. I really enjoyed it. So I would say it is. I would say I would say. And then I continued on my reread, and I read Royal Assassin, the second book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Royal Assassin was my least favorite of the Farseer trilogy when I first read it. On reread, it is absolutely incredible. On reread, like, knowing the full context of the story, and just a newfound appreciation for Royal Assassin. So, yay. That's all I'll say. And then I reread Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. If you want to read a satire of Gothic novels and a satire of books about books, you should definitely read Northanger Abbey. It is hysterical. It's very underrated in my opinion. And then I read Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I had read Salt Slow late last year, I think it was, or maybe mid last year, I can't remember. But Julia Armfield's short story collection, and this is her first and only novel. It's not creepy, and it doesn't have the horror elements that I was not necessarily expecting, but that it is kind of marketed as. It's marketed as like this creepy horror, like, literary fiction book, but it's very much an exploration of grief and relationships, and there are some unsettling elements to it, but it is very much steeped in the connection between this woman and her wife who goes missing, not necessarily missing, but is trapped underwater. And it's just a really, really wonderful novel, I think, and I'm very excited to read whatever Julia Armfield comes out with next. So I will say that it is a new favorite. Put it right. Yeah, right. All right, and then I read The Hod King I reread The Hod King by Josiah Bancroft, the third book in the Books of Babel series. I had some frustrations with the structure of it, more so on reread. I don't remember having this frustration the first time I read it, but for whatever reason, on reread, the structure of it was really jarring and cumbersome for my reading experience. I still enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading The Fall of Babel, hopefully next, maybe. And then I read Don Quixote. I read Don Quixote over the course of 2 months. I absolutely adored Don Quixote. It was so surprising how much I loved it for a book that was written in the 1600s. It is still feels so modern, which partial thanks to the translator of Edith Grossman. The translator can only do so much with the content and the text that they are translating. But Don Quixote is simultaneously satirical and heartbreaking and grand and funny, and it is nothing like I thought it was going to be. All I knew about Don Quixote going into it was that Don Quixote thinks that he's a knight, he has a faithful squire in Sancho Panza, and Don Quixote fights a windmill. That's all I knew. It's almost 1,000-page novel in two parts, and it is spectacular. I absolutely adored it. So if I hadn't read Assassin's Fate this year, Don Quixote would be my favorite book of the year so far. Everyone needs to read Don Quixote. And then I finally finished Stormbringer, the second volume of the Elric saga, the new Elric saga bind-ups by Michael Moorcock, and I thought this was spectacular. So these new bind-ups are binding up the Elric novels chronologically, and the first bind-up literally was a 50-50. I liked two of the novels, two of them not so much. They're not bad, but I'm like, they're a little bit too weird for my taste. But this second bind-up, the Stormbringer bind-up, all of them were spectacular. All four of them. I adored them. I was surprisingly moved in multiple instances in this bind-up. And I can't wait to read more of the Elric Saga bind-ups and just more of Michael Moorcock's writing. His writing is gorgeous, but simultaneously so easy to read. And I just love it. It's so good. Yeah, so I would definitely say it is... Yeah, I would put it right there. And then the last two are short story collections. I pretty much finished them on the same day, I think. Or at least within a day of each other. Because I have a tendency to read a story every day if I'm working on a collection. So Gods of Want by K. Ming Chan. This is a weird one. So a lot of the stories I don't want to say that I didn't get, but they're very all right, let me just backtrack. K. Ming Chan, she has an incredibly distinct authorial voice from the get-go, from the first story. And that is something that I am incredibly appreciative of and admiring of. The stories themselves, the majority of them were misses for me. There were a couple that were good, that were memorable. So I would say... Yeah, I would say I'd put it... I'd say I put it here. Glad I read it. Just because of the very distinct writing style. And then I read The Rock Eaters by Brenda Peinado. This, on the other hand, was an incredibly solid short story collection. While her writing style was more traditional, the authorial voice she wasn't really pushing boundaries like K. Ming Chan was. However, I just really clicked with her writing style in this and the stories that she was telling. I just liked the kind of magical realism, light fantastical elements to this collection, and I really enjoyed it. So I would say this one is a new favorite. Yeah, there we go. Got it. All right, so that is it. That is what I have read over the last 6 months, from January through June. Look forward to sharing the second half of the year with you in probably January or February of next year. I guess let me know, what was your favorite read of the first half of the year? What was your least favorite? Did you reread anything? Please tell me what the point of Deathless was, because I genuinely don't understand it. And everyone, please read Don Quixote.